they have 5 Big 12 starter level wide receivers on this, at least 5 on this roster right now, in my opinion. And we couldn't say that, maybe we could kind of say that in 17, and then Jesse Ertz got hurt, and then that just kind of fizzled out pretty quickly. But between, obviously the ones, Jace Brown, Keegan Johnson are the ones that everyone knows about, but I would include Dante Cephas in there, Jaden Jackson, and Trey Spivey as well.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. I am John Kurtz, joined by Cole Manbeck and Derek Young, all of us back here together. Appreciate Cole for filling in last week and picking up a couple of great interviews. Obviously, the Joe Klanderman one dropped earlier this week. Make sure you get out and listen to that. And while you're doing it, you could be sipping on a nice glass of Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. You could be sipping on a nice glass of 360 vodka from our friends at Holiday Distillery. Whichever you would prefer, both tremendous options, both continue to get rave reviews, and both will support some great K-State folks at Holiday Distillery. These are fellow Cats, so make sure you support them as well. Holiday Distillery, Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Go find it wherever fine bourbons are sold. Nice to have everybody back together. And it's great to see all of you gentlemen. We're getting ready for fall camp. We are recording here Wednesday, and we've got practice firing up Thursday, or is it today? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's today. Okay, today. So we got to see the videos of everybody like rolling into camp, man. I mean, it's starting to feel very much like football season with fall camp actually here. DY, you're our info man, particularly when it comes to the goings on with the football team and some of the minutia that happens there. Like, what are you hearing about all these guys heading into fall camp right now?
Yeah, I guess if we're going to just talk generally, it's probably that relatively the team is in good health. There was no, real setback during the off season. You typically have a setback, an injury or two in the off season that you're kind of dealing with in fall camp or have to deal with, weeks into the season. And surely that's going to come up during, practices in the next handful of weeks. You're not going to get out of there unscathed. You typically don't. But I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, that they don't really have any, health hurdles to navigate. The one that's probably the most might be Asa Newsome, but he's been cleared, and you're just, maneuvering through how he is going to, not only because he's got through the physical part, but now has to get through the mental part of the recovery of last year's knee injuries. So I would just say, generally, high expectations, but a healthy team that doesn't have any early hurdles to navigate so far.
All right. Well, I like that. I mean, the Asa Newsome thing is a bit of a bummer if it's going to take him some time to get going. We know linebacker was just kind of a tough luck position last year as far as injuries go. And then, even if you want to just classify it as attrition heading into the offseason here, that will be, if we're going to start talking about storylines, one of the storylines, like how does a guy like Alec Marinko really fit into that linebacker room? But I don't know. It's hard not to get excited listening to Joe Klanderman talk about the defense, Cole, when you had him on the other day and heard the rave reviews about Toby Osensami, where he's going. DY, I know, wrote a lot about that on K-State Online as well, if any of you guys are KSO subscribers. But I guess to you, what were the biggest takeaways from what Joe Klanderman had to say about what seems to be a defense really deep with talent? Like, I guess my takeaway is that it confirms what we have been saying for a while. I know I've been saying this for the last 2 years. Like, hey, they've been recruiting better the last 3 years, and you're starting to see that really permeate the roster, where it just feels like they have much more depth of talent than what they had at the beginning of the Chris Klieman era.
I just got the sense that he thinks this might be his most talented defense. This is his 5th year as the defensive coordinator at K-State. Obviously been in Manhattan all 6 years with Chris Klieman, and hearing him talk about the depth, he made a comment that he thinks they could play up to 25 guys on the defensive side of the ball, and that might be more than they've ever felt like they could play. And when we were naming off names throughout, I kept forgetting names when talking about guys to him, and then I'd be like, oh, wait, there's another guy that I forgot to throw in. When you think about the secondary of this football team, and you think about, obviously, Jacob Parrish and Keenan Garber at corner, 2 experienced guys there, but behind them, they're really high on guys like Justice James, and then redshirt freshman Donovan McIntosh, Nigel Thomas, and at safety, there's 6, 7 guys that you could name there. You start with VJ Payne, Siegel, Jordan Riley. He specifically called out, obviously, Siegel, said he wouldn't trade him for any safety in the country. Jordan Riley, he said the Ball State transfer, he wouldn't trade for many guys in the country as well. And then, you got the guys behind him with Colby McAllister, Jack Fabris, Wesley Fair, Steiger, etc. Like, you just keep going down the list. I started talking about linebacker, and I'd asked him about Austin Moore, and I'd asked about Des Purnell, Asa Newsome, Marenko. I forgot to ask about Romaine, who's a middle linebacker coming off some valuable experience last year as a true freshman. So same thing at D end. You could name 6 or 7 guys. I just think they're really excited about the defensive depth that they have on this football team and the top end talent as well. If I were to choose a position that maybe I was most concerned about, I don't know, maybe like depth a little bit at nose tackle, and then maybe still depth at linebacker if Asa Newsome can't be 100% to start the season. But again, we've talked about it before, Asa Newsome getting hurt in late September versus like Kobe Savage when he got hurt in November against Baylor a couple years ago. There is an advantage that Asa's a couple months ahead of that process. So he's about 11 months out from when he tore his ACL now, I guess a little more than 10 months. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of talent on this defensive side of the ball. And it's a defense that last year they did have some advantages to face a lot of backup quarterbacks during the season. But they did have the advantage there, and they produced the second most points per drive defensively allowed, according to Brian Fremont, in the last 17 seasons for K-State football. Were 33rd in ESPN's SP Plus rankings defensively. So they were decent last year, and I think they can take a pretty substantial jump this year. Stan Weber, when we had him on last week, said he thinks the defense will be ahead of the offense to start the year and will kind of carry this team early on.
Well, that makes sense. And to be honest, kind of leads me into what is our biggest storyline of the week this week, which is talking about just the overall season, right? We stand here on the precipice of the season starting with fall camp. And to me, the overarching number one storyline, which of course is brought to you by our friends at Alinco. If you have any home improvement needs, make sure you check out our friends at Alinco if you're anywhere in Kansas City or Manhattan or surrounding areas. There's just a lot of hype, and it all centers around the offense predominantly because of Avery Johnson. I mean, you've had the New York Times piece come out where the New York Post, and I was looking into this. It's like not exactly a New York Post writer. It was for another outlet, but through the New York Post, kind of like the New York Times, the Athletic relationship there. But you still have a major outlet pushing, hey, Avery Johnson is our pick to win the Heisman Trophy. Bruce Feldman just wrote a really nice long article about Avery Johnson. Andy Staples has been all over the Avery Johnson Heisman thing. Like, there's just a lot of hype surrounding this team, led by Avery in the offense. But it's probably typical when you have a new starting quarterback breaking a guy in like that maybe they would lag behind a bit behind the defense, and the defense that we feel is good as we do about it. So I think that's fair. And the real question here is, DY, like, can this team live up to the really lofty expectations that are in front of them?
Yeah, last year they were picked to finish second in the Big 12, and obviously it didn't work out that way, and they didn't advance to Arlington. They're picked to finish second in the Big 12 once again, so they're going to have to take some of those lessons. They've already kind of, we've heard some little changes here and there just to kind of keep their eye on the ball a little bit more. This is kind of what, read between the lines, what Chris Kleiman told us while we were in Las Vegas, just to kind of handle that hype, handle those expectations a little bit better. And for me, it's more about like mixed feelings about the offense, because it's kind of the opposite of what we typically see from a Kansas State team, where you're kind of excited about the playmakers and the skill position guys and the quarterback and the electricity and explosiveness that you can create, between Chase Brown, Keegan Johnson, DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, Avery Johnson. But then you have worries because you have, worries might be putting it in more of a hyperbolic way, but then you have question marks, right? You have a new offensive play caller because Colin Klein's out of the building. Matt Wells is the new quarterback coach. Connor Riley is the new primary play caller at offensive coordinator. And the spot you're replacing the most at is offensive line. So there's a lot to be excited about when it comes to the offense, but then there's some clear question marks why they could maybe get out of the brakes a little bit slow.
I'll make this simple, guys. My prediction that we made a while back, Kansas State will win the Big 12 championship, and as a result will receive a bye in the college football playoffs. So I'm fully aboard. I think this team is mature enough and has enough experience that I do believe that they will live up to the hype machine. People will say Avery Johnson is a true sophomore quarterback, but we've talked about it before. I don't think I've ever met a kid 19 years old or heard from a kid at his age, especially at the quarterback position, that's as mature, humble, has the humility that Avery Johnson has. He's ready to go for this, and I think they have more depth and explosiveness on the offensive side of the football. That's going to be a huge talking point as we head into this season is, how do they make a jump in the explosive plays offensively, something that they didn't necessarily have as much as they probably would have liked last year. They have more talent at wide receiver, more talent at running back now with Giddens and now Dylan Edwards added in. I think this team can make a huge jump when it comes to explosive plays as well. And then defensively, I think there's plenty of depth and talent on that side of the football. And that's why I think K-State will be the Big 12 champs the second time in 3 years in 2024.
Well, I know our friends at Alinco are excited about that. A local company based out of Kansas City, owned by tremendous K-Staters, an industry where so many home improvement companies have been bought out by national corporations. These guys are local. They've been locally owned since they started in 1986. So if you're thinking about getting new windows on your home or doing a bathroom remodel, Alinco specializes in premium window replacements as well as Kohler Lux Stone shower systems. You need new siding on your home, folks at Alinco have you covered there as well. And it's not just for folks in the Kansas City area, Western Missouri, Northeast Kansas, surrounding KC Metro. If you're in Manhattan, Emporia, Topeka, Wichita, if you're from smaller towns like Rossville or Council Grove, Alinco will come your way. They can take care of you there too. So just go to alincohome.com. That's ALENCO home.com. Check out all the great services they offer. And you can even call Sam, 913-961-2165. And he'll get you taken care of and probably talk some cats with you as well. Because, again, these are K-State folks who approached us here on the pod. So please do go support them. All right. So the hype is there. Cole is buying fully into the hype. DY and I maybe not quite as much. We are more along the lines of being a little bit more cautious with this. How well do you think Avery is going to be able to handle this, DY? Let's start there. Where do you think Avery Johnson comes in on being able to handle all the hype that's with him?
He's probably the most prepared to handle it. It's kind of like what Cole said, just from a maturity standpoint, his disposition. He's wanted this all of his life, and basically every move he's made for the last decade has been to get to this spot. So he's going to be completely ready for it. He started in the Pop-Tarts quarterback. It was his first start under center. Started a wide receiver against TCU, I want to say. On first start at quarterback was the bowl game. And I think that was probably a really good peek into just the way he carries himself, because it's easy to maybe, throw some balls that you shouldn't or make some decisions that you shouldn't. And he was probably more careful than he had to be. And that's basically the opposite of what you typically see from a young quarterback. So in terms of Avery Johnson, that part of the equation is something I'm not concerned about, how he will handle the height, the expectations, because he wants this and he doesn't let it get to his head. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, it really doesn't impact him. He stays pretty even-keeled all the time. It's really rare.
Yeah, and I mean, you read the Bruce Feldman piece that you mentioned in The Athletic and published in the New York Times as well, John. I mean, Justin Hoover, his old quarterback's coach, passing academy that he runs, he mentioned in there, like, Avery Johnson can throw the heck out of the football, and I'm paraphrasing there. And I think a lot of people were frustrated, including Avery himself, last year, that probably had the perception, well, he's more of a runner than a thrower. Avery Johnson can throw the heck out of the ball, and, I think it's a matter of just cleaning up a little bit of his footwork. I think Matt Wells is the perfect guy to do that. I mean, you bring in a guy, an co-offensive coordinator, your quarterback's coach with the experience of Matt Wells. I mean, Stan Weber, when we talked to him, he wanted to make it clear that Avery Johnson can throw the football really well as well. And it was a matter of, just cleaning up a couple of things that Matt Wells would get cleaned up this year heading into the season. So I'm really excited to see what Wells does with Avery and what Avery does with a full offseason. He's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger. He's not just a runner. He's going to be able to deliver the football and throw some strikes downfield to where you're going to have to respect all aspects of his game. And this offense is going to be really hard to defend. I mean, we talk about explosiveness. I mean, Jace Brown is a guy that averaged 16.2 yards per catch last year as a true freshman, which was the most in the country in terms of yards per reception out of true freshmen in all of college football. So you got explosiveness there. You talk about DJ Giddens. he can make big plays too. I mean, he's not just a 5-yard per game running back, per carry running back. I mean, he can bust a big one in both the passing game and in running game as well. And then Dylan Edwards, obviously we know how explosive he is. And can Keegan Johnson make that jump now? Can he be healthy this season and be the guy that they expected to be last year, which is a true number one wide receiver in this offense, and a guy that we were talking about heading into the 2023 season as the best wide receiver or most talented wide receiver since Tyler Lockett in a K-State uniform since 2014. Can he take that jump and be that guy? That's going to be a key part of this offense. But you guys know, like when you talk about running Dylan Edwards, DJ Giddens, and Avery Johnson all in the backfield at the same time, that's going to put so much stress and pressure on edge perimeter defenders in this offense between the RPO game and getting guys out on the edge and throwing pop passes to tight ends or to the receivers in the RPO. I just think this offense can be really dynamic because they've got more tools to work with. And Clanderman even said it. I mean, Clanderman said on the pod, I asked him at the end of it, you know, what it's like seeing this offense going up against them in practice and workouts. And he made a comment that they're as athletic and talented that they've been at wide receiver in his time at K-State.
They have 5 Big 12 starter level wide receivers on this, or at least 5 on this roster right now, in my opinion. And we couldn't say that, you know, maybe we could kind of say that in 17, and then Jesse Ertz got hurt, and then that just kind of fizzled out pretty quickly. But between, you know, obviously the ones Jace Brown, Keegan Johnson are the ones that everyone knows about, but I would include Dante Cephas in there, Jaden Jackson, and Trey Spivey as well.
Boy, okay. I've got more questions about the passing game, apparently, than you guys do. Actually, I've got 2 questions really to ask. One, I think will be in defense of the passing game. The other, not so much. But Cole and I are wearing some old school home field apparel today, which is apropos with the show. You guys know about our friends at Home Field Apparel. Get on over to homefieldapparel.com if you want to get the best college gear around. They have a ton of K-State designs, 50 plus there, perhaps some new K-State designs coming. We'll see as well, but it's a great place to be, homefieldapparel.com. If you want to get an old Big 8 champ shirt, if you want to get the shooting shirt, which I do have now. I wore it to the lake. I can't remember if we had talked about that. I wore the shooting shirt to the lake when we all hung out with Cole the other day. DY, do you have a Home Field Apparel hoodie on right now, or is it just a regular hoodie?
Louisville.
It's Louisville. Okay, it's Louisville. I made the joke in our Discord last night, patreon.com/3mod, by the way, to be a part of it, about DY wearing Texas A&M gear, and today it's Louisville, so not too far off. But if you want 100 plus schools, you can get it there too.
I wear this one a lot. This is one of the more comfortable ones I have.
Okay, well, hopefully for your sake, Louisville basketball gets going, because it's got to be kind of a rough time to be a fan there these days. I guess football's doing all right. It's your football school now, DY, so that's coming around. That's good. Homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code 3MAW24 to get 15% off your first order. Again, homefieldapparel.com, promo code 3MAW24 for 15% off your first order, and we're back in just a moment.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
You know when you discover a new binge-worthy show or a song that you play on repeat and you just have to share it with your friends so they can experience just how awesome it is too? Well, that's how we felt when we discovered that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's such an awesome deal, there's no way we could keep it to ourselves. Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan and switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your own phone number and bring along all your friends. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/3ma. That's mintmobile.com/3ma. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/3ma. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Well, for anybody who thinks that we are being too much of a hater, we are being too pie in the sky, you want to attack Cole for being too much of a homer, we have great news for you. No longer are you just relegated to finding us on Twitter or leaving YouTube comments, which, continue to do that. But we got a new way for you to get in touch with us. It is the Mint Mobile hotline, 913-407-6524. Shoot us a text. Send your questions or comments to the KCSN hotline, which is powered by Mint Mobile. Boy, I'm a little scared about this. Calm. All right, calm. Make sure that you are relatively sober if you shoot us texts on this thing. Actually, maybe not. It might be better the other way. I do believe I told him on the Discord last night that it's a 4-drink minimum to text this thing. But calm, just be careful. Be calm. It's okay. So anyway, that's how you can get in touch with us. Give us your questions or comments. You might find it on the show. It's a way to get in touch with us and perhaps get your voice heard on the show. And if you join at patreon.com/3ma, the Discord, you might find yourself mentioned on the show as well. So, you want to sign up for $5 a month to get bonus content and access to the Discord, then that's a great way to get on the show as well. All right, the two questions I have about the passing game. Well, let me table the receiver discussion because, no, let's take it right now because DY said that first. 5, what did you say, starting Big 12 caliber receivers on this roster?
Yeah, and to be honest, you can argue, obviously, whether it's proven or not, and a handful of them are.
And listen, love the Cats. Hope this take ages terribly, but I would argue it. I would sure as hell argue it.
No, I think you absolutely have 5-star levels. Whether they will play like that or live up to their ability is another question because a few of them have not proven it. Jace Brown has not proven it for a full season. Keegan Johnson has had the injuries. Dante Cephas had a rough year at Penn State. Jaden Jackson has been inconsistent, I would say. And obviously Trace Spivey, as young, hasn't played a ton. But to say they're starter level, I think that's not debatable. We know that they are. Whether they play like that and do it is another thing.
Well, I would just point out that the highest statistical production of any of these guys from a season ago was 27 for 437 and 3 touchdowns, which, look, Jace Brown, I'm not going to argue with you at all on that. Obviously, the guy's really talented. He was a freshman. He came on and he was great in the back half of the year when he got his feet under him. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm with Penn State fan.
I think we're quibbling over what they are capable of, which is what I am saying, and what they have done to this point.
I'm just, look, I think Avery Johnson will elevate everybody. I think there's a reason for optimism here, but I got really burned on Keegan Johnson last year, who at this time last year we were hearing great things about from everybody within the program. And it just feels like we've done this, we played this game since Tyler Lockett left and just wishing and hoping for a receiver room to really step up. We're talking about storylines for the season. I do think that there is potential there, but I got to see it, man. I mean, this is one of the things, and they're really pushing hey, Avery can throw. If you're going to make Avery look good and live up to the hype and expectations, the receivers have to step up more than they have probably in a decade since Tyler Lockett left. So I think it is perfectly fair to be skeptical about the receivers until we actually see them get out there and do it.
I'm not saying not to be. I'm skeptical of it too. Like I said, in a way, none of the 5 have actually done it yet, but they are all starter level in the Big 12.
Yeah, I'm not too skeptical. So, no.
We know, Cole. We know.
Well, all right, look. So you're talking about Keegan Johnson, had a really nice year at Iowa, transfers to K-State, right? Iowa transfer, Penn State transfer, and Cephas. You're talking about Jace Brown, who produced one of the best freshman seasons at wide receiver in college football last year. Jaden Jackson, a transfer from Ole Miss, who was, good early on in the year last year, kind of faded as the season went on, didn't have a lot of plays that he made at the position, but, he can be a solid, reliable guy. And then you get the high upside guy in Trace Spivey, who's different than anything else they have because he presents the size and physicality at receiver that they don't have on this roster, other than you talk about Andre Davis, who's another guy who redshirted last year, talented recruit out of the KC area and son of Willie Davis, former Chiefs wide receiver. So you talk about Trace Spivey at 6'4". His name popped a lot at Big 12 media days. Several people brought him up. I think Chris Kleiman even mentioned him. Several of the players mentioned him. I think now after a full season in the system, I think he's going to be ready to go, and he brings a lot of potential to it. And look, when we talk about wide receiver, I mean, you got obviously the wide receiver group. But as you guys know, Garrett Oakley at tight end is a very talented piece to throw to. And then you're talking about 2 running backs out of the backfield in DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards that each had over 300 yards receiving last year and can both really catch the ball out of the backfield. Very good receiving threats, both of them, that can make home run type plays, especially Edwards out of the backfield and catching the football. And he's a guy they may line up some in the slot or motion out. They could do the same with Giddens. So I think when you factor that in, plus the wide receiver talent that they have, they just have more diversity in this offense and the ability to make more explosives and be better in the passing game.
Technically, they're less proven at tight end than they are at wide receiver.
Yes, but tight end, I've seen them do it. Tight end, I've seen them do it over and over again in the Chris Kleiman era. Receiver, it's been much more of a mixed bag. Now, 2022, they were pretty good, and Cade Warner is a guy that was definitely a miss. He took a huge jump for that 2022 season and was really, really productive. And then, Malik Knowles was kind of Malik Knowles, although he became more consistent. So it's not unprecedented, don't get me wrong, but I think of all the position groups, there's reason to be very, just keep your eye on that one much more so than a lot of them. Now, I mentioned this narrative. This is the other question I wanted to ask. This narrative that's out there that clearly K-State seems to be aware of, or at least people around the program, because like you mentioned, Cole, Stan was out there saying, hey, he can throw the ball. He can throw the ball. And, we heard that in some of the interviews too that we did at Big 12 Media Days. You seem to hear it a lot from people look, Avery can throw. Avery can throw. Avery can throw. Avery can throw. My question is, with all the hype that he's getting and people really loving him up for the Heisman, are people around the program, is the program a little too hypersensitive to just the haters that are the rivals or the Twitter, people on Twitter out there calling Avery a running back, that have a reason to not like him? It just doesn't seem like nationally there's as much of a question from people about the fact that he can throw the ball. And I know that we would sit here and tell you, the bowl game was very impressive, and he threw away probably 5 to 7 passes that obviously affect the completion percentage. Again, receivers maybe not getting open, which hurts some of that. So, I don't have much of a question that Avery can throw the ball. I have much less question about that than I do, can his receivers get open? I just wonder if we and people around the program have bought into that a little bit too much from just the haters, essentially, out there who say that Avery Johnson can't throw.
I just think it's been something that he's tried to prove people wrong, has heard throughout his entire life, and kind of is, I would say he's a little sensitive to that, and he can't wait to prove people wrong in that aspect. That's something that triggers him, I think.
What's the stat I pulled last year after the bowl game, guys? I can't even remember, but I think I pulled the QBR of all the high-profile or top 10 or top 15 quarterbacks in his recruiting class from last year, and Avery had the highest QBR. Now, granted, some of those guys didn't even see the field that were in there, but we were talking about Oklahoma's Jackson Arnold, Tennessee's young quarterback, who I'm going to butcher his name if I try to pronounce it, so I'm not going to go there. And some of the other guys. Avery Johnson completed 37 of 66 passes last year for 479 yards. He didn't throw a pick. He had 5 touchdown passes. Again, it's a limited sample size, but Justin Hoover said in that piece in The Athletic with Bruce Feldman that published yesterday on Tuesday that when you run a 4.3, I don't think people realize how good he is at throwing the football. I hate it for him and I know he doesn't care that people take away from just how good of a passer he is and how good he is going to be, end quote. That's Justin Hoover, private quarterback coach that runs a passing academy in the KC area and works with a lot of very talented quarterbacks. Avery Johnson can throw it. I get the question of is K-State being overly sensitive about it? I don't think so. I think they've got a quarterback that they truly believe in, and there's been a knock on him from people on social media, et cetera, throwing a couple throws that he bounced in the bowl game against North Carolina State and maybe a couple misfires. And again, I think that's all going to be cleaned up with his footwork, and I cannot wait to see it against UT Martin in the season opener, just to put on display how good of a passer he can really be.
Yeah, I think some of it nationally is not he can't throw, but it's always about how fast he is and how good of a runner he is. So the story becomes about his legs rather than his arm. I think they want to say, you guys keep talking about his legs, just wait till you see his arm.
And can I be honest? I don't want to see his legs that much, right? I mean, I want to see him when he's got a busted pocket and he can get upfield and break a big play, or he can get on the edge and a couple of zone reads per game. I'm fine with that. Where he's not, but I don't think we're all in agreement. We don't want to see Avery Johnson taking too many hits because he has to stay healthy for this football team. I'm more excited for his arm than his legs. Yes, he has the capability to bust big plays and big play potential, but I don't want to see him used anything like he was last year, and I know we're all in agreement with that. And the coaching staff is, where when they put him in the game, he was running the football half the time. You know, I think no QB powers up the middle, everything on the edge, or if it's a busted pocket or you can get upfield and bust a big one, I'm all for that. But I want to see his arm more than I need to see his legs.
Well, if he took a cut up of his best throws last year, I still think that would look really impressive. I mean, I think of he threw the one, was it Jace Brown against TCU, kind of down the sideline. And then obviously, again, Jace Brown in the end zone against NC State for the game-clinching touchdown there. I mean, both of those are just beautiful balls. So, yeah, like I'm with you. I mean, I don't doubt it at all, and that is absolutely the part that I want to see the most for every single reason that you mentioned, health being toward the top of that list. We loved up the defense, and deservedly so, understandably so. But, you know, to me, if you ask me, and someone did ask me this the other day, like, hey, what is the biggest question mark for the team? And I said, well, really, I'm going to give you two. It's, can the receivers produce on offense, and can the interior of the defensive line hold up on defense? And if you wanted to extrapolate it to the entire defensive line, because there's some unproven talent that we feel really good about at defensive end, like, can those guys stand up? And that's nothing against Brendan Mott and Cody Stufflebean. Like, again, there'll be key parts there. But we believe in the talent at defensive end. Defensive tackle, I mean, I guess, like, I believe in Uso and Damian Ilalio, but do they have enough depth, and do they have enough health, you know, to hold up? Which I guess is basically the same thing, depth and health there. But that is the biggest question of the defense. How big of a factor is that going to be this year, how well that position group holds up?
Yep. For me, I don't know that depth is my concern on defense. Necessarily at any spot. I would just, and they have a ton of returning production as well, to be quite honest. A lot more on defense than on offense. So
I guess I would push you a little bit, DY, on defensive tackle, which is what I'm talking about specifically here. Like, I don't, you know, Uso got hurt last year. If Uso gets hurt,
then it's Ilalio.
But then who's behind him? Like, who's your second defensive tackle?
They're in a better spot there than they were last year, I would say, at that point. Because last year they absolutely didn't know. Now you at least have someone who was heavily recruited there, and Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, that you didn't have last year, and you have Asher Tomaszewski, who we know very little about, but he's obviously going to be better in year two than he was as a true freshman in year one, and maybe can get on the field. So, and to be honest, like, I know they've had two before, but you're using that third and fourth defensive tackle maybe once or twice a year. You really are. And if you don't, then you are literally the worst. You had really, really bad luck. Like, they got down to the third or fourth, I think, each of the last two seasons by game 12 or game 13. And one of those was a pretty free situation too. So you only play one defensive tackle. If you expect to have more than four, you're going to be SOL, because I don't know that a lot of teams that run an odd front have more than three or four playable defensive tackles. So I don't think that situation is anything remotely different than what you're going to be accustomed to in other spots. A lot of returning production. To be honest, I guess my little bit of a depth question would be, just because of the bad luck at linebacker, you lost Jade Clifton because he's going to do a mission, and Asa Newsome might not be 100% ready to rock by game one. What are you at outside linebacker? Is Cam Salas and Rex Van Wy ready? If they are, then that alleviates that part. And they are, athletic guys with a lot of upside too. So you're just talking about, again, guys that can do it but are unproven. And then at corner, I don't know, right? So you would love what you have probably there, right, with Keenan Garber, Jacob Parrish. I'm a big fan of Justice James. You have often needed a fourth corner. Do they have that? Is Jordan Dunbar, the transfer from Rice, that guy? Is Kenigel Thomas that guy, who's also been a little bit banged up? Is Donovan McIntosh that guy? So I think there's probably more apparent questions of depth, maybe at like the outside linebacker spot, at least early in the season, or maybe that extra corner that you've wanted or needed in the past couple seasons as well. So that's where I'm at. And with Joe Klanderman saying this could be the most talented defense, maybe across the board, but it's just like, it doesn't feel like they did when they won the 2022 Big 12 title, right? Because you entered that year knowing you had a top draft pick at corner in Julius Brents. You entered that year knowing you had an all Big 12 corner as well, and Echo Boydo, at least one that could play at the all Big 12 level. More proven commodities at corner, more decorated commodities at corner. You ended up with a safety in Josh Hayes that got drafted in the NFL. This one probably has that at Marquis Siegel as well. So that's a little bit different, a little bit the same, but the corners I think were more decorated. You had Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who was already a defensive lineman of the year, if I remember correctly, and had that 5-sack game against TCU taken away from him. So I think you had more proven star power on that defense from a talent standpoint than you entered this season with.
Which is what Joe Klanderman said on the 3-Mall pod earlier this week, is that they might not have the household names that everybody knows about, but they have a lot of talent on the defensive side. And as I think about the 2022 Big 12 championship team, remind me, who else did they have at defensive tackle without Eli Huggins? So they had Huggins at nose, and then was Uso the number 2?
Huggins, Uso, and then I was going to make this point earlier, D.Y. I mean, they were literally in a goal line stand situation to to keep themselves in the Big 12 championship game. And Damian Ilalio, who was 3rd or 4th on the defensive tackle depth chart, was literally in the game making a play. So
right. But having your 3 best nose guards all get hurt in the same game is a complete rare exception. If you're down to your 4th defensive tackle, every team's going to struggle in that situation.
Well, I was kind of comparing the depth similar to that team with Huggins and then Uso behind him and Ilalio. That was really some of the first snaps I think that Ilalio had even taken that entire season. I think they played most of the 2022 year with just 2 defensive tackles at nose, if I recall correctly, and Uso came in a lot late in games and kind of mop-up time. I mean, Huggins on the field a lot, and I'm sure I'm missing one other guy that they maybe shifted down.
What I will say is it's not necessarily connected to depth. They're not as good at defensive tackle as that team. They don't have one defensive tackle that's anywhere near as good as Eli Huggins, in my opinion, because people forget how good Eli Huggins was, and that's what's missing from this defense, in my opinion.
But this could be a year where the light bulb really comes on. Now, Uso missed a lot of the spring, right? But he's a junior college guy. He was a raw guy coming from the high school ranks where he played volleyball, basketball. He was a raw football player that went to JUCO in Garden City, and now he's in year 3 of playing in the program of actual playing time. And could the light come on this year? Could he really flash?
And I'm a John, when he comes to wide receivers, the belief part. I'm not there on the belief at that point. That's why one of my bold predictions this year is that Damian Ilalio is probably your starter and best defensive tackle by the end of the season. We've just kind of been sitting and waiting on Uso a little bit, so I got to see it to believe it.
I mean, I think Ilalio definitely will make a big jump. He got a lot of valuable experience last year. I'm high on him as well. Look, I know I like to paint a lot of rosy pictures here, but I will say an area that they got to get better at on the defensive side of the football that was a disappointment last year was run defense. Obviously, we saw that against Iowa State. K-State allowed 5.1 yards per carry last year, ranked 116th in college football against FBS opponents, specifically 4.4 in 2022-23 season, which ranked 87th in the country. In 2021-22 year, they allowed 3.8 yards per carry, which ranked 35th in the country. So they kind of trended downwards in what they're allowing yards per carry on the ground. Got to get better there, and I think they will be this year. As I think about pass rush as well, that's an area that I think they need to be better at. Last year, they ranked 99th in college football with the sack percentage rate of your opponent's time. And the percentage that your quarterback, the opponent, drops back to pass, K-State sacked them just under 5% of those occasions, which ranked 99th in the country. They were 82nd in the country with a 5.7% sack rate in the Big 12 championship season. So I think they need to generate more of a pass rush, which I think they will. That was something that Joe Klanderman specifically called out on the pod earlier this week that released on here, is that they now have more guys that are capable to get after the quarterback. And he cited an example of the Oklahoma game in Norman. Late in the game, K-State was up 41-27, I believe. And, K-State was dropped back into a soft zone with around 3 minutes left in the game. And it was just, Oklahoma was in the hurry-up offense. And Joe Klanderman looked out on the field at one point because guys were gassed, and he had 3 guys on the defensive line trying to rush the passer that were all 300 pounds each, and they were not natural pass rushers. And he made the comment that he doesn't feel like they're going to have to do that this year, that they're going to have enough guys to where they'll be able to rotate and sub guys to constantly be able to get after the quarterback. And then something that we also have talked about on this show before, and DY, you've highlighted it, is they feel like, and Klanderman said this, they feel like they have more length and prototypical size at defensive end and along the defensive line than they've had before for this 3-3-5 defense. Obviously, Cheedy is a monster with his length, but obviously Travis Bates as well, Jordan Allen, Ryan Davis, Brendan Mottback trying to get a little bit bigger and stronger heading into his final season at K-State. I think they feel like they've got more of that prototypical size they're looking for up front, and hopefully it generates more of a pass rush, which gets back to Toby as well. Can Toby be that guy? He's a freak athlete. He's put on some more weight and muscle. You wrote about it, DY, on KSO. He could be a guy that becomes the next Khalid Duke. I think he has even a higher ceiling than Duke, to be honest.
Not worried about the end, but D-tackle's got to prove more to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. DY, I think we're kind of on the same page. We were addressing different parts of concern there, but that is, to me, the biggest position group question mark. Linebacker probably right after that.
If Marenko is right, that does solve quite a bit at linebacker.
And corner, DY, I guess to me with corner, like, I just trust them so damn much with the defensive backs. And I was going to mention, like, my guy. If you want hashtag my guy, for those of you that used to listen to my radio show this year, might be, now I'm going like way under the radar here, but Jordan Dunbar, man, I love that pickup. I like what I'm hearing about him. I think he's somebody that could be really productive in the corner room.
They'll probably be fine at corner. They got three I like.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about
others, I couldn't like.
When you think about what they lost, I mean, in the secondary, they lost Kobe Savage, who I think was a bit of a shell of himself last year, to be honest, following the knee injury.
Who's that?
And then Will Lee, obviously. Will Lee had some flashes. Let's be fair. Yep. Like he had some moments where he was pretty good. Everybody's going to remember the Iowa State game.
Will Lee landed at Texas A&M, so he was a good player.
If he's right, he's a stud. So
yeah, if he's mentally locked in, checked in, I mean, he can be a really good player. So let's give credit there. Will Lee he's a long corner. They were excited about him. It just didn't work out at the end there. So they lose a talented piece in Will Lee, but they love Garber, and he's now going into second year as a full-time corner. They're really high on him. Obviously, they love Parrish, and they like the depth they got behind him. And let's remember, guys, this is a K-State secondary last year that ranked 14th in all of college football in pass efficiency defense. They were second in the Big 12 behind, I can't remember the number one team. I think it might have been Oklahoma, actually, which is a shock because Brent Venables being such a fraud and not knowing how to defend anything anymore. But, they were second in the Big 12. In fact, if you look at the new look 16 Big 12 in 2024, K-State's pass efficiency defense ranked ahead of all of those teams, all 16 teams or all of the 15 other teams in the new look Big 12 last year. And now they have most of those guys back and more depth than ever in the secondary. So to me, it comes down to, I trust the pass defense a great deal. I know they had some busted coverages, especially early in the year last year. They got to avoid that, and I think they will. But to me, it comes down, can they defend the run better this year, avoid some of the big plays there? And then also, can they generate more of a pass rush to help that secondary as well and force some negative plays and get teams in long situations?
I'm going to throw in a couple of little notes here. One, you guys, I think Cole was talking about the 2022 defensive tackle room earlier. The name that I dug up, does anyone want to take a guess at the name that we were missing there?
Wasn't Timmy Horn, right?
No, this was a transfer though. JUCO transfer, I believe, actually.
Oh, so they had two JUCO transfers at defensive tackle on that team then.
Robert Hens.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And Robert Hens, to be fair, wasn't really a prototypical nose tackle. He was more of a 280-pound pass rusher type. So,
yeah, he was probably more of a defensive tackle than Javon Banks was last year.
That's true.
The other thing I wanted to mention is you brought up, Cole, how Joe Klanderman said, hey, we don't really have the household names, but we've got the talent. Isn't it funny? We're sitting here talking about the 2022 team and saying, yeah, you're coming into the year knowing you don't have the household names that you did then, which is true with guys like Brents and Felix Anyudike Uzama. But yet this year, without the household names, K-State was picked second by DY's ballot not being submitted in the Big 12. And in 2022, K-State was picked fifth. So it's like this year when you don't have is this just, I mean, obviously some of it is a new conference, but also some of it's probably just credibility built up from the last 2 years and the Avery Johnson effect.
I think it's more the offense has some of the flashier names. It's funny because everyone's going to want to talk about the offense, at least on a national level, right? Because that has DJ Giddens, that has Dylan Edwards, that has Avery Johnson, maybe Jace Brown. I don't know if he's really registering on a national level yet, but the more fun and sexier things to talk about, headline-worthy stuff, is some of this offensive stuff, which, to Stan's credit, I think he's correct, and I've said it for a few weeks as well. I think they're going to have to rely on their defense early as Connor Riley gets his feet wet as a play caller, as the offensive line sorts things through and figures it out with because they'll have as new a group, on that front, which is probably the main storyline in offense that they've had in 3 years, because they basically had the same offensive line for 3 straight years. So now there are some names that are still lingering around, but there's a lot of new guys that they'll have to rely on a lot more, and was probably very valuable. And Carver Wells played as much as he did last year. Easton Kilty, that addition is probably one of the biggest moves they made in the offseason, considering the need that they have and what they are expecting out of the offensive line and how much he'll have to be good for that to come to fruition. And then Andrew Leingang is probably the biggest, one of the bigger keys to that unit, because he's someone that could start, that's probably played the least of the starters.
I mean, I think a large part of it, with like the lofty expectations, it just gets back to the consistency of Chris Kleiman. I mean, Bill Connolly over the last 3 seasons wrote that K-State's won 27 games and averaged an SP Plus ranking of 14.8, which ranks 14th in all of college football during that stretch, second behind only Notre Dame among programs outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. You guys have heard me start that stat before, but if you also look at Brian Freemall's FBI ratings as well, Kansas State in the new look Big 12 has been about as consistent as they've been out of the 16 teams in this league headed into 2024. In fact, I think they were second or first. I'll have to go back and pull the numbers for some of our August preview shows that we do more in depth. But Kansas State was first or second in the Big 12 in the new look league in terms of his FEI ratings over the last 3 seasons as well. So a lot of credibility there. In fact, I went through, when we talk about the defensive side of the football, I actually went through Connolly's rankings of all 16 teams in the 2024 Big 12 over the last 3 seasons and weighted average them. And I also included Texas and Oklahoma in there. So I really looked at 18 teams. And if you go through there and you weight it and average out over those 3 seasons, his SP Plus rankings, K-State ranked second in those out of those 18 teams, including Oklahoma and Texas, in SP Plus defensively, behind only Iowa State. Really pretty incredible to think about. And so I just think there's a consistency factor with this program. Yeah, there's some areas they need to get better at on like the defensive side of the football and offensively as well. But, it's a matter of flipping a couple of those close losses last year. That was really the difference between 2022 and 23. They won close games in 2022. When you think about the 10-9 win in Ames and Iowa State and the overtime win against TCU in the Big 12 championship and others as well that I could go down the list and name. And then last year you lose on a 61-yard field goal at Missouri. You lose when Will Howard had a hold that potentially could win the game from 5 yards out in overtime against Texas, and they lose that game as well. Like, if you flip a couple of those games, we're talking about Kansas State a whole lot differently, which is why Kelly Ford's what-if rankings, if you flip one-score games last year, Kansas State would have been his best team in all of college football, which is crazy to think about.
That Texas game still gives me nightmares. I was doing an interview this week, and somebody had asked me about that, and I was just like, oh God, I forgot about that, dude. Will, come on, man. Come on. Just run through the hole. The way that they had their 4 losses last year, the 62-yard field goal of Missouri, the overtime game in Texas, the Snowmageddon where you couldn't tackle a soul, just the fashion in which they took losses last year was pretty impressive in a negative light. Yeah.
So, and I mean, granted, they did have a break go their way, obviously, at Kansas with some of the things that happened in that game to help them win. But yeah, there were some situations where if you flip those results, Kansas State season's a whole heck of a lot different. Yeah.
But the only one where you felt like you just had no business winning necessarily was Oklahoma State because they just came out so slow.
Outplayed from the start there. Yeah, I know we got to wrap here in a minute, but and John, not to steal your role as the host here, but DY K-State, when I had Clanderman on, the reason we had to end when we did is because he had a couple of recruits that were at his door that he was meeting with, and I saw K-State just picked up Logan Bartley, safety that was committed to Wake Forest. That's a top 700, top 750 player in the On3 industry consensus rankings, and the same with Noah King, another safety or athlete from Ohio who was a pretty highly regarded recruit that chose him over Nebraska, Kentucky. I mean, the significance of adding these two secondary guys over the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's pretty major. Noah King's a really good recruiting battle. I think they're really excited about what they got in Logan Bartley. You mentioned top 700. Judging by conversations that I've had, I think they certainly think he's a lot better than that. I think he might be one of the favorite commits that they have in the fold right now. So that's huge. Yeah, I've kind of been preoccupied at different parts during the show because of just a lot of things coming out this morning. Obviously, got this commitment from Logan Bartley, the Wake Forest commit, the safety from Florida. But then, we got a 5-star, number 3 player in the country in basketball, Darren Peterson. Surprisingly, put Kansas State in his top 8. I'm hearing that K-State's are really trying to get into that one and think they have a shot, and he's going to visit sometime in August.
Love that. I love seeing this week that they had the alumni. Do they call it like an alumni week? Is it an alumni?
Yeah, something like that. And before you get that, I should say Darren Peterson, the 5-star, visit in August. It is fair to say that most do consider him a KU lean at this point.
Well, we know where Castillo wound up. Kansas fans, I'm sure will love that one. I know people will fight me on their overall interest there, but on the alumni thing, I mean, Marquise Noel, Dean Wade, Keontae Johnson. Who else did we see that was back? Tyler Perry, Barry Brown.
Pretty damn good team that the current roster had to go up against in that scrimmage that they did. It's a really cool deal. I mean, I remember last year I was interviewing Uric Malagi around this time, associate men's basketball coach on the staff, and I was interviewing him, and he actually had just gotten out of a dinner. It was their first alumni weekend or week thing that they were doing to kick things off, and something that Jerome Tang and Scott Drew had done at Baylor previously and wanted to implement it at Kansas State. And I think they have a little more momentum with it this year. I think they got more guys back than they had gotten before, and so it was really cool to see some of those guys back and Marquise talking some trash out there.
Is Curtis Kelly there too? I saw Kurtz tweet, so it made me think that he probably was there, but I'm not sure that I saw him in any of the video.
I'm not sure. He was back at one point a couple weeks ago for the Purple Rain and the TBT tournament, coaching that. And but he's got a job now as an assistant, I think, at Rio Grande Valley down in Texas.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if he's still back or not, but we love Kurt as well.
Okay,
but Dave, I don't think there was any concern, but I don't think it was mentioned. But David Gasson was in a few of those, so he's actually back on campus.
Yeah, he was in the video. Marquise was getting after David Gasson a little bit there. He was too scared to shoot for $100. Sorry, DNG. Didn't mean to call you out. On that note, we appreciate all of our sponsors. There's like 17 of them at this point. Usually I like to go through and list them off. I'm going to have to get them all written down on a sheet. But that's a great sign because we got a lot of people who love what we're doing here. And thank you very, very much to everybody who is a part of the show these days. For Nick behind the scenes, for Derek Young, for Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another edition of 3 Mile.